We'll call the meeting of the Judicial Council.
Chief Justice Nathan Hack here, Presiding Judge Sharon Keller, Carlos Amaral, Judge Gary Belair,
On the phone.
Justice Bill Boyce,
Here.
Miss Sonia Clayton, Miss Clayton,
Right here, sir.
Judge Brandon Creighton, Judge Bill Gravel,
Here.
Miss Allison Ho,
On the phone.
Judge Scott Jenkins,
Here.
Miss Ashley Johnson, Judge Kelly Moore,
Here.
Representative Andy Murr,
Here.
Judge Valencia Nash,
Present.
Chief Justice Sherry Raddick, Mr. Kenneth Sachs,
Here.
Representative John Smithy, Judge Polly Spencer, Judge Ed Spillane,
Here.
Judge Vivian Torres,
Here.
Mr. Evan Young,
Here.
Senator Judith Saffarini.
Present.
Allison, it's Nathan Hack. Tell Jim congratulations for us.
I will. Thank you so much, Judge.
Yep, absolutely. You've seen the minutes. Are there corrections or objections? That's the June 30 meeting. If not, they will be approved. We'll go to reports. First is from the Texas Incident Defense Commission. Jim Pesky, you got the color.
Thank you. Let's tell me a story. Okay. Good morning. So we have materials before you, and the TIDC report should be in your materials. And I want to briefly highlight a few of the new discretionary grants that the commission approved at our 2 meetings over the summer. First, we awarded a grant to El Paso County to expand their public defender office to include a unit specializing in representing the mentally ill. And attorneys will be supported by social workers to address a client's criminal cases in the context of their often untreated mental health challenges. Next, the commission approved a grant to Culberson County to create the Far West Texas Regional Public Defender Program covering 5 rural counties. Because of the lack of attorneys and the remote location of these counties, they have often struggled to find qualified attorneys to handle indigent cases in a timely manner. So the program will be based in Alpine and will handle felony and misdemeanor cases. Jim McDermott was recently announced as the chief defender for the office. Finally, we were awarded a grant to Nueces County to assist them in scaling up a small pretrial risk assessment program, a pilot project, and conducting an evaluation of that program. And this is something that we're hoping to see and have seen elsewhere in the state, and we are looking forward to seeing other counties move in that direction. Now Jim's going to tell you about this.
Thank you, Judge. And how do we work with the, oh, here we go. It's
Wow.
magic. Wow. Technology always amazes me. Good morning, everyone. What I'd like to do first is introduce our newest 2 staff, Morgan Shell. Hello,
Hi.
Preston.
Hello.
Morgan Shell began with us on September 18th. She externed with us this past spring through Texas Tech, recently graduated law school, and sat for the bar in July, did a little bit of travel, and so we're very excited to have her on board and to tell you a little bit about her work ethic. For that externship, she worked full-time from January till the end of April, and they're required to get in, I think, 450 hours for credit. She wound up putting in 650 hours and published a paper, and was just incredible. So when we had an opening and there was the hiring freeze, it was a perfect opportunity to bring her on board, so we're really excited. Werme, and Werme, I unfortunately can't pronounce your last name. Again, incredible talent. Somebody from OCA, Maria, connected the 2 of us. Werme just recently graduated from the UT School of Law with his LLM. He's a licensed attorney in Brazil. He, like Morgan, also sat for the bar this summer. So we have some incredible talent working with us, and so I just wanted to welcome both of them. And then I want to thank one of your council members and one of our commission members, Representative Andy Murr. He is responsible for getting the biggest increase in the Fair Defense Act since the inception. he and Senator West got Senate Bill 2053 passed, and it was a tight budget year with us with a $6-7 billion deficit. So this funding has already had a positive impact of $3 million that came in this summer that we were able to get out, the commission was able to get out in grants at the end of August. Now, there's going to be still some work to do because although the money was appropriated to the Texas Indigent Defense Commission, we were not given authority to spend it. So it'll be accumulating in the account, and ideally through, with Jennifer's help and David's help, that money can get released prior to us going into the 86th legislative session, because if we don't get it released prior to going into the 86th legislative session, then we've got to ask for an exceptional item of $34 million and kind of fight for the money again. So hopefully with the talent that we've got in OCA and TIDC, that money, and with Representative Murr's assistance, we can get that money released. Publication that's been in the works for probably about 4 or 5 years, a primer on managed assigned counsel programs, just published in September. It looks at the 3 programs that the commission has assisted counties around the state to set up: Collin, Lubbock, and Travis County. I want to thank Scott Ehlers, one of our policy analysts, who really took the bull by the horns and spent the time going out to the jurisdictions, interviewing people, pulling together the work that had been done and putting it into a good publication. It's available online. If anybody's interested in a hard copy, we'll be happy to get it to you. We also want to thank the Texas Department of Public Safety, because they have a in-house shop that does typesetting and design, and they do it very, very inexpensively. So we contracted with them to do it, and nothing against law enforcement, but they're not typically, they don't really get an opportunity to be creative in their design department. And we said, hey, we want a little bit of pizzazz in this. So they were actually excited to work with us, and we're very pleased with the quality of their work product. Next, just last week, we held a 2-day indigent defense workshop. We had over 100 attendees from across the state, probably 20 to 25 elected officials. The title was Catalyst for Change, and building off working and changing what's not. We started doing this really shortly after we came into existence. And this workshop, unlike other workshops, there are the talking heads. We'll have the presentations so people get substantive materials, but the real beauty of this program is then we do breakouts, and the counties identify 2 to 3 issues that they're grappling with in their particular jurisdiction, and then we group like counties together. We have facilitators, moderators. They come together, put together a plan on how they're going to address at least one of those issues, and then since the price of admission is free, what we ask is that they write out a 90-day action plan. Marissa on staff collects that, Marissa and Doriana, and then in 90 days, we follow up with the jurisdiction to see how they've done on implementing their action plan. And it's amazing the fruits of that work over the years, because all of you have gone to professional development and you'll have ideas, you get back to the office, you're pounded with emails, staff, your inbox is full, and ideas that you may have had get set to the side. And then when you're cleaning out your desk in 12 months or 18 months later, say, we didn't do that. So they'll be getting a call from us in 90 days. So a lot of good work has come from that. These are some of the outstanding presenters. You can see Representative Murr and Jim Allison started it off. Scott was talking about his new publication. It looks like Wesley was interviewing for CNN or something like that. We had Jaime Esparza, the district attorney from El Paso, who was talking about direct filing and their electronic portal that allows defense lawyers access into their systems. And it's really quite incredible what El Paso's done with that. And then our wonderful staff, we have Sharon Whitfield, Deborah Stewart, Brandon, who's one of our policy analysts. The bottom panel was Measuring What Matters, our data people, Jesse Tyler and Meg with the Capital Area Private Defender Service, and y'all know Dottie Carmichael, the Senior Researcher, Public Policy Research Institute. Dr. Bill Kelly, a sociology professor from the University of Texas, came and talked about his book on treating the mentally ill offenders, and it's really quite an incredible work that he's done. And then, of course, Edwin Kovacs, our grant manager, and then I went a little too far, so I turn it back over to Judge Keller unless y'all have any questions.
Any questions? Judge Keller?
Okay, thank you. Next, as many of you know, Jim Bethke is going to be retiring from his position next month. And he's been with OCA for 16 or 17 years, and he's been director of the Indigent Defense Commission for 15. We are really going to miss Jim, and we're not going to be able to replace him. But thankfully, he left his imprint, and will always leave his imprint, on the Indigent Defense Commission. He started it from scratch, and his personality shows in everything that we do, and we look forward to that continuing. So even though we can't really replace him, we had to find someone to take over his job. We posted the job, we got 30 applicants, we ended up interviewing 6 of them, and 2 weeks ago, we had a phone meeting with the rest of the commission and recommended this young man, Jeff Borkhart, to the commission. They voted to accept our recommendation, and he will start as our new executive director on December 1st. Jeff is currently the first deputy director and counsel to the ABA Center for Innovation. He's a lot like Jim in many ways, and he's got a little David Slayton in him. So we are really looking forward to seeing what he wants to do and how he wants to move forward. Did you say uh-oh? So, Jim, in recognition of your time at the Indigent Defense Commission and at OCA, the Judicial Council has created a resolution on your retirement. So please come accept this. And I'm not gonna read the whole thing, but it acknowledges his service and his history. And this is on behalf of the Judicial Council. For you to remember us by when you get to love it.
Oh, that's beautiful. Thank you. I don't have very much shelf space, but I'm gonna find a spot. We've got a very small office, and I'm trying to get a hole fixed in the wall before I get up there. I am looking forward to going home. So, thank you so much. I really appreciate that. Thank you.
Oh.
Jim, you've just done a marvelous job. And, people of Texas are in your debt, and you had a profound effect on a lot of people's lives through your work. So we appreciate all of that and look forward to hearing from you.
Yes, sir. Well, thank you, and I appreciate everything y'all have done for me over the 16 years, and it's been absolutely incredible and the most rewarding in my life. Judge Torres, I'm sorry that I'm leaving before you come on board. I was absolutely tickled when I saw that the chief had appointed you. He is definitely a wise man. You've done so much good stuff for your jurisdiction. Judge Kelly Moore sitting across the table, him and the presiding judges, oh my gosh, thank God we have 9 regional presiding judges, now 11, because the Texas judiciary is very broad and diverse, but the PJs invited us in and we could participate at each meeting, and as a result of their work and their leadership, we have the largest regional public defender program for capital cases in the country, serving 178 counties, and that would not have happened but for the PJs. And Chief Justice Raddick here, she was always my confidant in navigating the sometimes turbulent political waters in Harris County. Would keep me out of trouble with commissioners and judges and say, Jim, don't do that, or, you know, so that's our secret, so that's just for us in this room. And Judge Keller, oh my gosh, this woman works so incredibly hard, and she will spend hours before we go into our commission meetings, meeting with all staff. She also reviews, edits all of our publications before they go out. And then something you don't know about her is we'll occasionally have a get-together. And who's the one who's in the kitchen? My wife loves her, Patty, making sure the dishes are all done before she sits down or leaves. And it's Judge Keller. So, I mean, and the leadership, having had her at the chair, I could not have had anyone better. And then Slayton, I thought I worked hard till he came on board. David set a new standard. And I was like, we have to up our game when David came on board. And the team that he's put in place with his directors and staff at the Office of Court Administration, and I've been with OCA since 1998, by far is the strongest and brightest team ever. And then the chief, of course, in your state of judiciaries, your attendance in our meetings, and y'all probably know this, but what he's done to improve access to justice on the civil side, not only in the state of Texas, but nationally, he's a hero. When I'm at an ABA or a national conference and they see that he's on our commission, it's an honor having him, because he not only cares about the criminal justice system, but what he's done on the civil side. So I could go on, but I just want to say thank you to y'all.
Chief Justice Raddick, we'll go to the Civil Justice Committee.
Okay, we met yesterday. It was a sprightly group headed by me, humbly asked by our chief. We also had Senator Zaffarini, whose help I so appreciate. Evan Young, who's here, Judge Torres, and Ken Sachs all participated. And we had two very good presentations, one by a lady by the name of Brittany Kaufman, who is from the Institute for the Advancement of the American Legal System. I had never heard of it before. They're outfitted in Denver. So she had a lot of very valuable points to make, and we are going to take those into consideration. David Slayton, of course, was there armed with all kind of helpful information, and particularly about the online dispute resolution that's being tried out by some different places, and its potential impact on the Texas courts. So we will be looking at that and giving you issues to consider, and hopefully some resolutions that will be moving the ball forward for the Justice Committee.
Questions of Chief Justice Raddick?
We're just getting started. Our first meeting was yesterday, so.
The Institute goes by ILS, ILS, is headed by a former retired justice of the Colorado Supreme Court, and she's been very engaged in these efforts for years and years, so they do good stuff.
Yes.
We'll go to the Criminal Justice Committee report. Judge Moore.
Thank you, Chief. Since I have the floor, I'd like to thank Jim personally. I've known him since he was a pup around OCA. And our criminal justice and defense in the state of Texas will never be the same because of Jim. And we really appreciate you. And then I'd like to thank Senator Zaffarini. I'm not convinced there's only one of her. When it comes to, and same with Andy Barr, when it comes to helping the judiciary, they're everywhere. They're both everywhere. And we notice it, and we appreciate it very much. We know you have other things to do. And then finally, I'd like to thank Megan Lavoie, who's working with our committee from OCA, and all the other OCA staff for the invaluable assistance they give us. We couldn't do any of this without them. We had our beginning meeting under our current charge on September 1st in a 3-hour meeting to discuss our 4 committee charges. The first charge is to continue with the work, evaluation, and monitor the issue of pretrial release that we worked on in the last session and had some success until the very end, which is all too common. But the committee, after discussing the issues related to pretrial release, we still believe that it's a worthy project. We're going to have some benefits with the project in Nueces County that Judge Keller talked about, and Harris County doing some issues with this, and we hope that we're going to have some more real Texas information by the time the legislature meets again. I think one of the issues is that people were concerned with, we don't want to know how they do it in New Jersey or wherever these other programs were going on. And so we'll have a real on-the-ground experience to look at by the time we get to the next session. David Slayton previewed the OCA's pilot version of the risk assessment tool that's going to be implemented in Nueces County, and we're really excited about that. As everybody knows, a simple, validated risk assessment tool is key. We can't go anywhere without that, and so that's the great thing about the things that are going to be going on in Nueces County. Our second charge is to study the impact of opioid drug use on the Texas judiciary and recommend any reforms necessary to curb the impact of opioid drug use. We're just getting started in this. We talked about the fact that you can open up any major newspaper on any day and read about this issue that's going on. We heard from several speakers. We heard from Mary Souter and Lisa Ramirez from THHS, HHSC, who told us that of the more than 33,000 opioid-related deaths in the United States in 2015, 1,186 were in Texas. There are some pockets in around Kentucky and in that area where this thing seems to have started and growing, and so it's not making as big an impact on Texas yet, but believe me, it will be. We also heard from Michelle White with the National Center for State Courts, and we'll be keeping a close eye on the work that group's doing, along with a consortium of state chief justices from Illinois, Indiana, Kentucky, Michigan, Ohio, North Carolina, and Tennessee, which have formed the Regional Judicial Opioid Initiative. There's a lot of work going on. It's still relatively new. I mean, we've been hearing about it for years, but the real work is really just starting, and so we'll have a lot of resources that we can look to, and we'll just follow that wherever it leads as far as the role of the judiciary in Texas to address that problem. Our third charge is to continue working in conjunction with the Governor's Criminal Justice Division and Specialty Courts Advisory Council, and with the help of Anissa Johnson, we'll be following through on that. And our final charge is to oversee the study required by Senate Bill 47 from Senator Zaffarini, which is going to look, OCA has been charged with investigating and reporting back the information that's available related to Class C misdemeanors that are not traffic violations. Apparently they're having a really big impact on people as far as being able to rent apartments and just all sorts of things. And so I think one of the things that struck me in the committee analysis of the bill was that people may or may not be able to get a job or get an apartment or whatever based on what county they committed a Class C misdemeanor in, because of the way records are kept. And so we're going to try to look at that and see what we can do with that. Some very interesting issues, and we look forward to continuing. We have a short fuse, and so we'll be working as quickly as we can.
Questions of Judge Moore? The Nueces County bill project was really positive, I think. And other counties have expressed interest. Dallas, Karen.
Glen Passes. Now I'm drawing a blank quickly.
But we're gonna be, in the interim, trying to get judges in those counties to experiment with the validated risk assessment tool, maybe use it. The legislation would have been helpful, but the judges could do this on their own. So we'll hope that we make some progress.
May I ask a question in that vein?
Yes.
Have you had any dialogue with any rural counties, since we have so many, for someone that would be willing to step up with assistance, and then we would be able to use that data at least from a rural point of view.
We're looking for, so just to give you a little bit more insight, OCA has taken what Nueces County was doing in a paper form using a validated risk assessment and has begun to automate it. We had a meeting about it a couple of days ago at OCA. We're on a fast pace to get this tool up and running. We think we'll have it, I actually began testing it this week, so it's actually functioning to some degree. We expect to begin to pilot it within the next 6 weeks in Nueces County, expand it out to a couple other counties. We're looking at 6 pilot counties, and some of those are rural. We want to have pilots who are in urban areas, rural areas, big counties, small counties, just trying to be able to make sure it works everywhere. And then the goal is that by January, it will be generally available to the judiciary to begin to use, so that we could, it's really kind of interesting. We're getting, as more and more judges are learning about this, we're getting more and more people calling us saying, hey, we want in on this. So we're trying to work as quickly as we can to have a good system up and running that will make it easy for the judges to use. So.
And I had suggested to you that you contact the 121st because it would really be a good rural county district to
yeah, that is one of the 6. I didn't want to mention it because I haven't talked to the judge there, but go ahead. I'll let you say
I think he'll cooperate.
So it's Terry County, which is where a rural county, but we're going to be looking for more and more. So we're trying to have a good balance of big, large, urban, rural, small counties.
And if I could say one more thing, Chief. I was trying to find it and I can't, but I've learned through the last few years that anyone can start a petition on change.org. There is a petition addressed to the legislature and the governor of the state of New Mexico that I ran across the other day that has 7,500 signatures toward its 10,000 goal, trying to do away with the Arnold Foundation assessment tool and claiming that this system is releasing bad criminals who never again show up to court. And you know, we have the publicity thing that we really have to look at, because I think uneducated people, meaning people who don't know about the system, it's easy to take the thought that we're just trying to let people out of jail, and that they're, since a lot of people still think that pretrial incarceration needs to happen for punishment purposes. We'll have those kind of things we'll deal with.
One of the things, Chief, that we're working on is when the Indigent Defense Commission made the grant to Nueces County, they also granted funds for evaluation as well. So the goal is to not only have the system up and operational, but have Texas data to show, you know, what's happening with people being released. And I think it's worth noting, I know this was mentioned in the Criminal Justice Committee, but for the rest of the council, that Nueces County started doing this in end of April, just on their own, using one judge with a staff person doing it. And from the end of April through the end of July, they reduced their jail population by 25%. Just that quickly, by using validated risk assessment to truly evaluate whether people are at risk and setting bail appropriately based upon that.
Hard to believe, though, that Texas Public Policy Foundation is soft on crime.
I agree.
Yeah. So, but there is lots of disinformation out there, or as we come to call it, fake news. Great. Judge Moore's agreed to go on the multi-district litigation committee panel, and so we're working pretty hard at that. We appreciate all he does. We'll hear from the data committee. Justice Gravel.
Good morning, Chief. Thank you for the opportunity and the privilege to serve as chair of the committee. It's always an honor when you've been voluntold by the Chief Justice of the Supreme Court that you're going to do something. So we appreciate the opportunity to serve. I want to point out our...
I'm going to honor you some more.
Thank you. Judge Nash appreciates it. We do honor her as well. Our committee is made up of some good folks. It's Judge Belair, Judge Jenkins, Chief Raddick, Mr. Armorall, Ms. Clayton, Ms. Johnson, and Mr. Young. We had our first meeting in September, on September the 18th. And I would like to point out to the committee that I took a little authority, a little leeway with my authority, and I involved the district clerks and the county clerks association, and we added 3 from their group to serve in an advisory capacity because it involves data, which involves our district clerks and county clerks. And we had our first meeting. It was productive. The great news is we understood that the last time the committee took the data role, it took them some 8 years to come back with a completed project. And our number one goal is to come back in less than 8 years with a completed project. We do believe it's going to be a lengthy project. We do have some recommendations, not only today, but some that will be coming forward, obviously, before the next legislative session. But it is a large proverbial elephant to eat, and so we're going to be taking that in bite-sized portions so we can be proactive. We have 4 charges or 3 charges initially, and then a 4th that was added. It's to continue to work and guide and revising the court's activity reporting that is provided to OCA. The second charge was to evaluate and recommend activity reporting components for the regional presiding judges, and we do have a bit of a recommendation that we'll talk about in just a second from that. And the third is to work in conjunction with the Criminal Justice Committee and the Mental Health Committee with creating the right evaluative needs for the collecting of data for specialty courts in Texas. And so I said 4, we had 3 charges. And so we're excited about those. We're beginning the slow process. We heard several reports. And I would like to point out, Angela, where's Angela at? Angela works for OCA in the data collection division. She has a large staff. 2 people or 3? 3. And we're talking about creating new data point questions, which is really a mighty task when you're looking at 3,000 plus courts in Texas, 254 counties, 28 million people, over 250,000 square miles. So Angela is amazing, and we are blessed to have her on our team. And I think she is now the best employee at OCA since someone quit and left us. But we're really blessed to have her. One of the recommendations I would like to talk about, because I don't want to blindside our committee, and then I'm going to pitch it to David Slayton. One of our charges was to have data points for the presiding judges. And the PJs met and came up with 7, 8, or 9 data point questions. And they didn't quite have their work completed in time that we had our committee meeting, so our full committee has not seen these recommendations, nor have we voted on those. But what I would like to propose, Chief, after I pitch it to David, is that we go ahead and adopt these recommendations from the PJs with the understanding that the data committee is going to go back through and see if there's any additional questions that we might want to ask. I know it's a bit of the cart before the horse, but the motive is that the PJs want to start collecting data now. And it's always exciting when judges are proactive and want to be supportive in that area. So, Mr. Slayton, I'll pass it to you.
Thank you, Judge Gravel. As Judge Gravel pointed out, one of the charges of that committee is to look at the PJ reporting, regional presiding judge reporting criteria. That's pursuant to a Senate bill that was passed, Senate Bill 1893, and Senator Zaffarini added an amendment onto that to require the Judicial Council to collect judicial statistics and other pertinent information from the presiding judges of the administrative judicial regions. And I provided a memo to you all in the materials that went out. But basically what OCA staff did originally was to look at the duties of the regional presiding judges and specifically in the light of what could we be collecting data that would be helpful to the judiciary to know, as well as anybody else who's wanting to look at the work of the regional presiding judges. And so with that, the recommendation, there are 9 data elements. I will point out we had some discussion after this went out about one of them, and I'll come back to you on that one. But the first one is with regard to, we would be collecting the number of assignments made by the presiding judges and the types of judges assigned, whether they are active or retired or former judges. So that would basically, one of the main duties of the PJs is to assign judges when there's a vacancy or a heavy docket or for other reasons. So we would collect that information from them on a monthly basis and have that information available statewide. The second one of these, which is the one that's we have a question for you all to think about, is the number of assignments made by the Chief Justice to the region. This is a data element that is currently being collected by the regional presiding judges. Obviously, since this is a reporting requirement for the regional presiding judges, the question that came up afterwards yesterday afternoon was, well, why are we including this one since it's the Chief Justice making it? Obviously, we can do it, but that's just something that you all can decide if you want to include it here or not.
I think the question is, what does the Chief Justice want?
So there we go.
On to that.
The third reporting requirement would be the reasons for the assignment. So when Judge Moore, as a regional presiding judge, makes an assignment, what are the reasons he's making that? So there's some transparency as to what are the reasons that the assignments are being made. So for instance, whether it's because the judge is on vacation, or there's a recusal, or assistance with heavy docket, those different reasons would be collected. So we would have statistical information on that. Fourth would be the number of days served by judges assigned to sit when there's a vacancy or an extended illness. One of the big challenges to the regional presiding judges and to the judiciary statewide is when there is a long vacancy, or if there's a judge who is seriously ill who remains on the bench, and the regional presiding judges have to make a assignment of a judge who then sits for sometimes years. And of course, when those judges are sitting, there's payment going from the state in the very limited resources that the regional presiding judges have. And so one of the things that they in particular wanted was, let's keep track of that so that we could let the legislature know when we're spending a lot of money and it's for this reason, that's why it is. So that's one of the required elements as well. The fifth one is the number of motions to recuse or disqualify that are heard by the presiding judges or assigned to another judge, and the number of motions granted or denied. One of the big questions that we received, in particular this last legislative session, was with regard to recusal motions. And there's really no good data out there as to recusal motions, and the regional presiding judges will tell you those are becoming more and more frequent. And so this information would allow us to be able to show how many of those are being filed, what's happening with them. If there is not a hearing, why there was not a hearing held. Sometimes the judges may decide those recusal motions without a hearing, but there would be reasons as to why that is, and otherwise what the disposition of those motions are.
Yes, Cindy.
And the point that was made was that we needed to know when hearings were held, because many of these motions are being denied or accepted without a hearing. And that was the key element that we wanted to know.
Correct. That is included in the reporting elements. The sixth one is with regard to the number of fee voucher appeals. So in the law, if a criminal defense attorney who is appointed asks for $1,000 for payment for their services, and the trial judge says, I'm only going to give you $200, they have the ability to appeal that to the regional presiding judges, and the regional presiding judges decide that matter. So we would be keeping track of that as well, how often that's occurring. In some regions that's happening quite frequently, so we'd like to have that information. The seventh reporting element would be the number of appointments of prosecuting attorneys to represent the state in public integrity unit cases. So these are cases where there's a allegation against generally an elected official, and the public integrity unit gets involved. If the prosecutor in the local jurisdiction has a reason to recuse or be disqualified from prosecuting that case, the appointment of the replacement prosecutor goes to the regional presiding judges, so we keep track of how often that's occurring. The eighth reporting element would be the number of Rule 12 appeals. Rule 12 of the Rules of Judicial Administration is the Public Information Act for the judiciary. And so when there are appeals of denial of records, those appeals go to the regional presiding judges, and so we would be keeping track of how many of those are occurring and the disposition of those, how many of those are granted, denied, et cetera. And then the last reporting element would be the number of appeals from the Judicial Branch Certification Commission. You may know that the Judicial Branch Certification Commission regulates process servers, court reporters, licensed court interpreters, and professional guardians. And if there's any sort of a sanction levied by the Judicial Branch Certification Commission against them, any appeal from that also goes to the regional presiding judges, and so we'd be keeping track of that information as well. And so those are the 9 recommendations. As Judge Gravel pointed out, OCA staff have consulted with the regional presiding judges and actually had a phone conference with them on Wednesday, a previous phone conversation with them a few weeks ago. They believe these are entirely appropriate, and we believe it's all the data that we could collect from them. Obviously, if the data committee finds additional information that they could collect, then certainly I'm sure the regional presiding judges would be willing to do so. But we think it will provide the judiciary and others who are interested in the information with a good picture of the workload of the regional presiding judges and more transparency as to what they're doing.
Questions?
I have one.
Yes.
Did you pursue the issue of appointments by presiding judges?
As to other positions?
Yes.
So Senator Zaffarini asked me specifically about appointments from regional presiding judges to other positions. So in particular, I believe she was aware of a appointment of a county commissioner.
And a JP.
And a JP. We checked on it. We're not aware of any authority that the regional presiding judges have to make those appointments. And so we did not include that in the reporting requirements because they don't have the statutory authority to do that.
Thank you.
Other questions?
We'd just like to figure out how that happened.
Yeah. Then is there a motion to adopt these reporting?
So moved.
I'll second it.
Any other discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? They're adopted. We've just, this is good work, and we've just got to get a better handle on the operation of the judiciary.
I apologize, I should have said this before the motion, but the recommendation from OCA would be that this be effective January 1st of 18. It gives us time to get them the materials and the forms to report on. Unless anyone has any objection.
When I was looking at the vacancies on the multi-district litigation panel, one question I had was how many pretrial judges do we have currently assigned, and nobody knows. We don't know those cases all went away, or whether they're still pending, or what the status is. So there's just lots of things like that we would need to know, and I'm sure the other two branches would like to know as well, just from a point of view of what's happening in our court system. We just got to begin to get that information, more information. Good, thank you, Judge Gravel. We'll go to Guardianship, Mental Health, and Intellectual Developmental Disability Committee report. Justice Boyce.
Thank you, Chief. The committee met on September 19th, and I want to acknowledge the hard work and contributions of the committee members, Allison Ho, Judge Kelly Moore, Representative Burr, Kenneth Sachs, Judge Polly Spencer, and Senator Zaffarini. I won't replow old ground other than to summarize that as the council is aware, from its inception last year, the committee delved into and recommended significant changes relating to procedures for screening and arrest of defendants with mental illness or intellectual or developmental disabilities. That's under Code of Criminal Procedure, Article 1622. Also looked at and recommended changes with respect to personal recognizance bonds for defendants with mental illness or IDD under Article 17.03, and then competency restoration procedures for defendants with mental illness or IDD charged with Class B misdemeanors under Article 46B. Where the committee is in a little bit of the position of the dog that chased the car and then caught it. These were significant changes. They were implemented as part of Senate Bill 1326, authored by Senator Zaffarini, and with the leadership of Senator Zaffarini, Representative Murr. Additionally, there was related legislation relating to funding of local alternatives to state hospitalization for competency restoration under Senate Bill 292 and House Bill 13. So when the committee met on September 19th, we zeroed in on 3 areas of focus as we move forward. The first is implementation and training with respect to these very significant procedural changes that have been enacted. That's taking a number of different forms. One of the forms is available on the OCA webpage, txcourts.gov. There's now an extensive drop-down menu under publications and training, under mental health, that walks through these changes that were implemented, also presents flow charts for competency restoration and screening as an aid to the frontline judicial officers and staff who are implementing these changes, mental illness assessment form, and reporting guidance. And that's been a significant project with great assistance of David Slayton at OCA and Megan Lavoie. Additionally, there have been significant discussions with the Texas Center for the Judiciary, Mark Atkinson, to talk about getting the word out through judicial training in upcoming seminars. And discussions are currently ongoing about what form that training is going to take in conjunction with the criminal justice training that will happen after the first of the year and other opportunities. That's been one focus. A second focus that we discussed at the September 19th meeting is legislation related to the guardianship compliance program. The committee's portfolio now encompasses the guardianship aspect of things, and as the council is aware, the guardianship has been a significant focus of the council's activities for a significant period of time under Judge Spencer's leadership. One aspect of that was legislation for creating and implementing a guardianship compliance program that was vetoed at the close of the last session. So we're going to revisit that and look for ways to address concerns and improve that legislation to address those concerns. The third area of focus that we identified relates to continuing discussions for the pathway towards the creation of a standing permanent judicial commission on mental health, intellectual and developmental disability, and guardianship. The consensus was unanimous among the committee members that a commission structure makes sense to be able to address all of these complicated issues, interrelated issues, in a thoughtful way across multiple sessions, and to build a bank of expertise that can be used to address these issues. And so those discussions are ongoing as well. And David, is there anything that you want to add?
The Supreme Court last week decided to create the permanent commission that Justice Boyce just mentioned. And we've been in some discussions with the Children's Commission about how to get it started. When we first began these discussions about a year or two ago, the Meadows Foundation was very hopeful that we would go this direction. My former colleague, Justice O'Neill, was kind of pushing on that too. And she thinks, and I think the court agrees, that this should take the form something like the Children's Commission that we created some years ago, 10 years ago, and have been very successful. And just the basic operation is someone to be in the day-to-day operation of it, leadership, a small staff, and then a lot of commissioners and collaborators who bring experience, judgment, counsel from all different aspects of the judiciary that are interested in or involved in mental health. So that's what the Children's Commission does with child welfare cases, and it's I think it's by any measure been very successful. It's the Child Welfare Commission is federally funded through the Child Improvement Program grants. We were afraid some of that funding would lapse for the coming fiscal year, and we asked the legislature to give us an appropriation in case it did, and it did. So the funding did not lapse, but it also is not there for the coming fiscal year. So we're kind of living in hopes these days on the Children's Commission, but right this second, they have a little extra funding that they could use to help the Mental Health Commission get started, particularly in cases involving children. So tentatively, we have asked the Children's Commission to prepare an order that the court would sign, creating the commission and setting up its structure. And the Children's Commission would begin operations here on the 4th floor of this building and probably hire 1 or 2 staffers to help with that. Judge Keller and I have consulted, and the Court of Criminal Appeals is going to be involved in this too, because so much of what we're going to be concerned about is criminal. So I think it will really be a forceful approach to these issues, and just like we did with the Children's Commission, we would look for low-hanging fruit in the next year to try to show the viability of the commission and its value before the session, so that we can make sure that it's more permanent going forward. If it works, and I think there's every reason to believe that it will.
Chief,
Yes?
will this be a commission on mental health or guardianship, mental health, and intellectual disabilities?
I think all of them.
Excellent.
Yep.
That's great.
Yep. We'll look at the details, and we'll share the order with the council when we come up with it. And we want Justice Boyce to be a leader in the commission, and our liaison is going to be Justice Jeff Brown, and we'll probably arrange a liaison with the Court of Criminal Appeals and make sure that there's plenty of involvement of the council and the courts in the commission's work.
I think it's wonderful to combine the 3 because you can't separate them.
Right.
They overlap. Any way you look at it, they're going to overlap. So
Yeah.
thank you for doing that.
Yeah, and we just don't have the resources to reinvent the wheel. And so whenever we can do 2 things at once, we should try to do that.
In this case, 3.
Yeah, right. So the Children's Commission has been asked to report back at our next conference, which is on October 17th. And I don't know if they'll make that deadline or not, but they'll certainly have it something for us in November. And so well before the next council meeting, we'll have a pretty good idea of how we're doing. And we'll thank Justice Boyce for his willingness to do all this, and that his work's bearing good fruit.
I'm sure he's honored too.
We'll go to the Juvenile Justice Committee. Justice Nash.
All right, thank you, Chief. Our committee met on August the 31st from 1 to 3 here in Austin. We have a lot of advisory group members, which is really good because we were able to really grasp a lot of different areas that we could focus on. Scott Griffith has been amazing at helping us on this committee, and we've come up with a few things. Of course, our first charge was to consider the best practices and necessary reforms to the juvenile justice system to improve the adjudication of delinquent conduct cases. This was our first meeting, and so we are looking at getting some additional data from Chen's data, the adjudications by type from various counties, and we're going to survey some juvenile probation offices about the type of diversionary programs that are available as well. We also noticed that some of the priority was the raise the age and related concerns regarding that. We want to get someone from Senator Whitmire's office maybe to come over and speak about maybe some concerns that they may have in regards to raise the age. We also wanted to go ahead and get a speaker, Tony Fabella, which of course has come before while I was serving on this committee, and talk about the report closer to home. We also are looking at Judge Burns. She has a great crossover docket with CPS in collaboration with them, and talking about some of the issues that deal with juvenile justice issues as well as CPS, and how we can get those two things discussed and see how the collaboration or a system that talks about how juvenile justice issues, CPS issues, and other things relate to have a better idea of how to assess the situation with a juvenile that is in the system. Our second charge was to oversee the study required by House Bill 1204 regarding the use of the terms child, minor, and juvenile in statute for fine-only offenses and the adjudication of those offenses, and to recommend any necessary reforms to improve the adjudication of those offenses. And I think the OCA is working with North Texas on cataloging some of those instances where those are used throughout the statute, as well as I believe Thurgood Marshall will also be a part of hoping to do that. So again, we're looking forward to our next meeting to make sure that we can get some of that data back, and that way we can focus on maybe pinpointing what issues that are doable for the next session, because there are so many and so many concerns in the juvenile justice system and reforms.
Questions of Justice Nash? Thanks very much for that report. We'll go to Public Trust and Confidence Committee. Judge Blunt.
All right, thank you, Chief. Good morning. We met on September 8th for 3 hours to discuss the two charges of our committee, and I guess it was our inaugural, because I think this is a new committee, right? So we had our historic first meeting on September 8th. Our two charges are to review the 1998 Public Trust and Confidence in Texas Court study that was done by the Texas Supreme Court, OCA, and the State Bar back in 1998. I think they surveyed approximately about 1,200 Texans. We also, our charge is to review the National Center of State Courts, State of the State Courts reports, consider updating or replicating the studies, and recommend any necessary reforms to improve public trust and confidence in the Texas judiciary. And also, the second charge is to possibly partner with Texas Tech Survey Lab to conduct an opinion polling. The committee heard from Megan Lavoie with OCA, who's been very helpful with our committee. She provided an overview of that 1998 Public Trust and Confidence in the Texas Court study survey. And we also heard from Jesse Rutledge with the National Center for State Courts, who discussed the center's State of the State Courts report. Each year they do a survey trying to pick timely issues. Last year their issues were fines and fees, and that was pretty timely. Our action items, what we decided to do is we voted to partner with Texas Tech to Survey Lab to conduct opinion polling based on questions from the 1998 survey. We were also, though, interested in asking additional questions, some that we received from the 2016 study by the National Center of State Courts, but also focusing on perhaps cash bail. We see that as a future issue and a current issue. Incarceration, technology, and customer service seem to be two new issues since 1998, especially online interactions that the public is having with our courts. There was a discussion about who to poll. The committee decided to poll the general population over 18 with advice from the Texas Tech Survey Lab, make sure we're balancing rural with urban, economic backgrounds as well. We also voted to conduct a separate poll regarding judicial selection to follow up on a judicial selection poll that was done in 2014 by the Texas Tech Survey Lab. So we thought that would be an area too that needed focused attention. We heard from Scott Griffith. He talked to us about the judicial centers of excellence, and we plan on our next meeting to look more. We had some questions on that. We also had some ideas. Some of the members had ideas about, possibly a method of renewing how a court can renew if they're found to be a center of excellence, how they can renew that each year. A big next step will be to formulate specific polling questions for Texas Tech. Our goal is to have this, and they're eager and willing, from what I've heard, to conduct this polling. And so we want to do it this fall so we can have the numbers by the spring and be ready in time for the legislature or anything else that the Judicial Council wants to do based on that polling. There are numerous other topics. Briefly, we talked about looking at time standards. This is the committee, not necessarily the polling, working at time standards, accessibility, the courts, open meetings, open records, the Commission on Judicial Conduct, examining that. We talked about that. Our next meeting will be held later in the year, and so those will be several issues that will be on the table.
Questions for Judge Blaine? Thank you, Judge, for that good report. We'll go to,
question in general,
yes, Senator.
Could all the members of the Judicial Council, or at least those who are interested, be informed when any committee meeting is held?
Sure.
Because we do have overlapping interests.
Yep, sure. We'll do that.
I don't think the overlap is necessarily bad, though.
No, I think it's great.
Yeah.
Like data collection
Right.
overlaps with everything, but I think it's great.
The report on the judicial response to Hurricane Harvey. Dave.
Thank you very much. Jim, I don't know if you still have the clicker or who might.
Sounds like home.
Yeah, that's right. So as you all know, about a month ago, just over a month ago, Hurricane Harvey made landfall on the Texas coast. It caused massive destruction over the next several days. I know we have several members of the council who are from Houston. Certainly can probably tell more about that than I can. And as you may expect, the Texas courts and the judicial branch personnel were not spared that devastation. But in the midst of the devastation, our court system and personnel were heroic and just kept justice accessible to those who needed it. So today I wanted to give you a little bit of an update on the judicial response to Hurricane Harvey, and I've got a little bit of a slideshow for you here just to kind of see some of the pictures of what's been going on along our coast. One of the things I thought was interesting, I don't know how many of you saw this graphic in the San Antonio newspaper, but this is the extent of the rainfall and the damage that occurred from Harvey when it came on the coast. But I think more interesting in looking at it from this perspective is sometimes look at it from, superimpose that over other states in the country just to show the massive size. You can see this one here basically covering the Carolinas and some of Georgia. And then if you look up in the Northeast, obviously a little hard to see there, but covering New York and New Jersey and a lot of areas. So obviously the extent of the damage in Texas was massive, and I know when I'm speaking to my colleagues around the country, this graphic has been kind of interesting to them to see just the extent of the damage that was done from Harvey. This is a picture of the front of the Aransas County Courthouse. Aransas County, of course, Rockport, where the hurricane came on shore. This was one of the counties that we had a lot of interaction with from the state level upon once Harvey went through. Of course, this is a county which is not large in size, and you didn't hear a lot about it on CNN and Fox News, but they certainly had a lot of damage there. A couple of other pictures, you can see the judge's office at the top there in the courthouse there, as well as the access area. You can see a trailer in the building there at the county treasurer and county auditor's office once again in Aransas County. One more picture here. This is more pictures from the courthouse. This courthouse was basically unusable once it once the hurricane cleared that. This is a picture. This is the easiest picture I have of to show what has happened in Harris County, and I know Chief Justice Raddick and I were talking beforehand, and I know Justice Boyce could also speak to this. The Criminal Justice Center building, which houses the criminal courts in Harris County, was severely damaged and will be closed for at least 8 months. And so you can imagine the chaos that has ensued from that, trying to relocate all the courts, all the personnel who were in that building. I also know that their jury assembly room was completely obliterated and will not actually be able to be used, and I read this week, not rebuilt in the same location. It is underground, which is perhaps an issue in that area, but something that they'll have to be looking at going forward. The sign on the right I thought was interesting. You can't really see it very well up there, but it's just taped signs on the wall showing courts this way, courts that way, and you can see the sign on the left there shows really the relocation from building to building. The county criminal courts and the district criminal courts are just spread all over the downtown Houston, the Justice Complex area. Certainly been an impact on Houston. Obviously, I've just highlighted 2 counties. We had many counties. Pretty much every county along the coast was pretty significantly impacted, including our courts of appeals. While they're building, I think it's interesting to note that the 1910 courthouse did not suffer damage. The old courthouse, all the new courthouses were the ones that suffered damage, so that might be an indication of the way we build things these days. And also our Court of Appeals in Beaumont was pretty significantly impacted as well. Although the building itself was okay, but just obviously the ability to access the courts there was pretty significantly impacted. One of the things that's interesting, I just wanted to point this out, just shows kind of where we've come from. In the midst of the hurricane, a few days after it made landfall, I was talking with Chief Justice Raddick and Chief Justice Kim Frost and a number of the other clerks and judges along the coast. And what's interesting is we got data from the e-filing system. The e-filing system in Texas never went down, so documents were able to be filed throughout the middle of the hurricane. And actually we got data showing that there were thousands of documents being filed in all these counties despite knowing what the courthouses looked like. The clerk's offices were unavailable, certainly no ability to go file in person, but filings were still coming in. And what was interesting is the clerk of all the clerks were doing this, but the clerk of the 1st and the 14th, I talked to him, and he had water up to his knees in his own house, but he had moved to his brother's house and had access to a laptop and the internet and was processing filings in the midst of the
For
hurricane.
both courts.
Yes. So, I mean, I think
Unilaterally, only one guy.
right. And what we saw this in really every clerk's office is that in spite of the huge destruction and the inability to even access the clerk's offices, the process never stopped. So we had clerks attorneys and litigants being able to file documents through the midst of it, clerks being able to process it remotely because of their ability to access the cloud, judges using Research Texas, which is our public access to the court document system, to be able to view documents that have been filed, and then to process orders back through the e-filing system, so that even with them being remote, they were able to do so. We had clerks, one of my big concerns, of course, and when Rita and I hit, we had courts who had records damage to their records. And so one of my first questions to the Aransas and Refugio clerks was, well, what about your records? And they said, they're all digital. They're all up in the cloud, so no, we don't have any issue. The clerk in Aransas, I'll show you a picture in a minute of her retrieving her records, but she had the only records that she was worried about were her archival records, the 1950s and older records, which were in the courthouse in a vault, but they were all fine. So just interesting to see that the impact that technology that we've been working on over the last several years allowed the courts to continue working. This is actually a picture of the Aransas County District Clerk's Office. They were able to find a spot that had Wi-Fi access and get some computers. All of their computers were damaged in Aransas County. OCA shipped them out within a few days, refurbished computers that we had here, and actually ordered them brand new laptops so that they could work. So they'll be getting those, and certainly I know they've been very thankful to have that. We also got them new scanners because they had debris in all of their scanners to scan documents that were filed in paper. So they were able to get up and operational within a few days. They held court. I should have included the picture. They held court outside a few days after, once the storm clouds cleared. because they had nowhere else to do it, but they were able to basically just continue functioning in the midst of the chaos. This is a picture from yesterday. The one on the right is the district clerk and one of her staff members going in to retrieve the records from the courthouse, which has now asbestos exposure and other types of issues. The picture on the left there shows actually where they are working right now. That's actually across a window. She said it looked like a nice picture of modern art, but it was not modern art. It is the ceiling of the building in which they are working, the front entrance. They're behind a glass where they're able to work in the back of the building. But this is the type of thing we're seeing really along the coast across the board. I just wanted to point this out, no offense to our friends from Florida, but this is the Florida, of course, Irma hit Florida. I thought this was interesting that basically they shut their e-filing system down when the hurricane was coming on shore. Not really exactly sure, but turns out the reason why they did that was, you can see in this next, that their court servers went down. So they had on-premise servers that went down. Thankfully, we didn't experience the same impact they did. I know Chief Justice Raddick and Chief Justice Frost and I were talking in the midst of it. The only issue they had was their building was on a generator, which was nice, but some of the computers were not plugged into plugs that were supported by the generator. So we learned that it needs to be plugged into an orange plug, not a white plug. But basically, we were able to help the court find computers that which were online, and so therefore they could continue processing filings in the midst of all of that. In addition to all of that, thankfully in 2007, presumably after Hurricane Rita and Ike, and I believe in response to some work the Judicial Council did, the law was amended to give the Supreme Court the authority to, when there's a disaster, and specifically with relation to a hurricane, to issue emergency orders to suspend certain deadlines and procedures. And so in the days thereafter, both the Supreme Court and the Court of Criminal Appeals issued a number of emergency orders, and some of them have just been this week extended for another 30 days. But I just put a list of them up here, a couple of them for your information. The Supreme Court issued an order authorizing that judges could modify and suspend deadlines and procedures in proceedings that were affected by the disaster. So if there was a lawyer who couldn't file for whatever reason and it missed a deadline, that they gave the authority for judges to extend those deadlines. The Supreme Court and the Court of Appeals issued an order that dealt with the statute of limitations. I guess that was a Supreme Court order on statute of limitations in civil cases. The Supreme Court issued an order permitting out-of-state lawyers to come and practice in Texas temporarily to assist with the great legal needs of Texans who were impacted by this. There were a couple of orders issued that allowed judges in Aransas County and Refugio County to conduct proceedings outside of the county. Oddly enough, in Aransas and Refugio, there was no electricity and nowhere to go. And so in order to hold proceedings, they needed to move to nearby counties. You may know that the Judicial Council worked very hard to get interlocal agreements between counties to allow courts to meet in each other's counties. Those became very important in this instance, and both the Aransas and Refugio counties were able to relocate to nearby counties and move their staff and their court proceedings to those pursuant to these orders issued by the two courts. The Supreme Court also issued an order giving members of the bar all of their bar dues were due, and they were about to be suspended. And so the court issued an extension of the deadline to allow members who were impacted by the storm to have a little more time to pay their bar dues. One of the issues we heard of early on was with regard to child protection cases, and there's a hard deadline of 18 months when the court loses jurisdiction over those cases. And so the court issued an order that allowed in those cases extension of those deadlines to allow the court to retain that jurisdiction. And then lastly, the Supreme Court issued an order extended deadlines for renewal of license and certifications for court reporters, interpreters, guardians, and process servers. So some of those whose licenses were expiring, we wanted to give them some extra time to go get those renewed as well. So it's pretty crazy around here for a few days and weeks, but certainly not as crazy as it was along the coast. But I think the chief and I kept just saying how remarkable it was to watch, the continuity operations plans, disaster plans, just really kick into gear and really just the heart of the people who are our judges, justices, and court personnel. Just pull up by the bootstraps or by the water, trying to stay out of the water to continue to provide justice to the people of Texas. So it's pretty remarkable to see, but we thought we'd give you all a little bit of an update. Obviously, the challenge for them continues. I know Chief Justice Raddick and I were just talking about it's still very difficult in Houston. And I know that I've been in contact with them even last week, their need for continuing flexibility because of that. You may know that Harris County canceled all jury trials from basically when the hurricane hit, and there's no announcement of when they'll resume, but at least through the middle of October, no jury trials in Houston, and that is, or Harris County, that is pretty remarkable. Our largest court system in the state, not being able to hold jury trials. So anyway, that's an update. I'm happy to answer any questions, or if anybody else has anything to add. Some people may have more information than I do even.
Chief Justice Raddick?
I just had to thank both courts and the OCA for their support. Kept us going. We had a great staff, but relief that was provided. I think relieved the lawyers and the courts, so that was good. And the support that you gave us to keep us going. It's pretty funny actually. So.
The Monday in the middle of the storm, the Chief Justice of Tennessee called me and said he had several lawyers call him that morning, and they wanted to volunteer to help folks down here. And we were working on the order that we did also in Ike that allows out-of-state lawyers to represent people affected by the storm through legal aid providers and bar associations. So I sent him the order as soon as we finished it Monday afternoon, I think. So he was going to try to do some organizing there. The next day, the Chief Judge of New York called me, and I wasn't calling them, they were calling me and saying, what can I do? And I told her the same thing I told Chief Justice Bivens. And so the New York lawyers created a hashtag, something or other, I don't remember the name of it. But it's a great effort. And the challenge, of course, and I visited with our Access to Justice Commission, is that when the storm hits, everybody wants to do something and they want to run in and help, and there's not anything to do but bail the water out of the building. But in a few months, as FEMA claims are being processed and insurance claims, then there will be more advice to give people. Landlord-tenant disputes are going to arise, and all of the typical work of civil legal services. So how can we get people to come back in March when we really need them? And they've got several plans to sign people up and try to get commitments from them now and try to make sure they're here later when the need is greater. So a lot of people trying to help. It is kind of encouraging about our profession and about the judiciary when judges across the country call up and want to help, and lawyers are enlisted. So it was good. I was down in Houston Friday, and Lone Star Legal Aid, which is one of the three federally sponsored legal aid providers in Texas, lost its downtown Houston office to flooding and fire. Which, why didn't the flood put the fire out? Well, actually, the flood caused the fire, so I don't know. Somebody will have to sort that out. But they can't use their offices, maybe certainly for months and maybe for a year. It's not clear. So one of their lawyers was in Brown Center Convention Center, where there was disaster relief. And an associate at another downtown Houston firm, McGuire Woods, which is a Virginia, started in Virginia. But it's a big firm, has offices all over the country, has an office here. But an associate from that firm was standing there helping, just volunteering, helping pass out stuff to folks that were coming in. And she overheard the Lone Star legal aid lawyer saying they lost their offices. So she went back to her firm and said, we got a lot of space we're not using yet. Can we let the Lone Star legal aid use that space? So the firm said yes. So I think they have 30 or 40 lawyers there. They have a bunch over at Latham Watkins, some in another firm. So I went by to see them. And at McGuire Woods, they're on the 75th floor of one of the downtown buildings. I forgot which building. And very, very nice. Offices, I was kidding him. I said, you're not going to want to leave. You're only going to have your applications in McGuire Woods. But again, you know, the work of Lone Star Legal Aid, when it was very important to be there, barely missed a beat. You know, maybe they were down for a day or two, and then they were right back on top of it. So that's good response. Yes,
Chief, I wanted to say thank you. We personally delivered the order from the Court of Appeals and from the Supreme Court to every JP and constable from Aransas County to Orange County. Many of our judges we found working in shelters of food pantries, not even worried about their own personal well-being. Most of them didn't have access to email, and we kind of felt like Western Union in the old days delivering that. But Chief, I just especially wanted to say there were some judges that were overtaken emotionally that you would share your personal contact information. And thank you. Thank you for being an example to Texas, and thank you for caring during some tough days.
lots of people have helped. Anything else on that? That takes us on the agenda to new business. And we have some amendments that we're required to make to the collections improvement program.
This is more of a technical change, and we are coming before you for your authorization to publish a proposed amendment to the Collection Improvement Program rule. The purpose of the amendment is to make the rule conform with the change in the law that passed this last session, House Bill 3167. I think it's in your packet if you want to see the specific language. Amended the population threshold requirements for the jurisdictions that are required to comply with the Collection Improvement Program rules. Under the old law, it applied to counties with a population of 50,000 or more and municipalities with a population of 100,000 or more. And the law made them change the 50,000 to 100,000. So now it applies to counties and municipalities of over 100,000 or 100,000 or more. So this is, we need your approval to go forward with the proposed amendment, and then we'll publish it in the Texas Register and get the ball rolling for adoption.
Questions for Mina? It's just in response to the statutory change. Then I'll entertain a motion to approve the amendments, publish them in the Register.
Move for your approval.
Second.
Any other discussion? In favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Carries. That's all we have on the agenda. Any, want to have anything else for good of the order? Then our next meeting is February 23rd, 2018. February 23rd. In case you haven't noticed, September is almost over. 2017 drawing to a close here. So we'll see everybody on February and begin to move closer to putting our package together for the 2019 session. Then, if there's nothing else, I'll entertain a motion to adjourn. We're adjourned.